Okay, so we are finally together to have a herpes talk.
Yay.
Yeah. I mean, who has that on their calendar, right?
I do every day.
Yes,
It's
it's true. You
it's
you do for what you do, yeah.
yeah, it's herpes all day, every day. Herpes, 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 herpes.
Right. Okay, well, I'm going to do a little intro for us in that we got connected through a mutual friend. She said you guys have to meet, and we talked on the phone and we said no, we really need to have time together on video to share, because I think we're both ambassadors, spokespeople. I don't know what the right word is. You're a holistic practitioner that's very focused on herpes. I feel like I'm out there helping to shift the narrative and the energy and all of the stigma that goes along with herpes. So much so that, as you know, I've put it on the cover of my book, Angels, Herpes, and Psychedelics. And so it just seemed natural that you and I should have a conversation, because you've also written a book on herpes, and this is your work on a daily basis. So maybe you share a little bit about your background, and how you came to herpes and what your qualifications are, because I know you're a holistic practitioner. So maybe just touch on that briefly and let everyone know what it is that you do.
Sure. My name's Christopher Scipio. I am an herbalist who's a holistic viral specialist. I specialize in the holistic treatment of herpes. I've been an herbalist for about 28 years, but really my whole life I grew up in a family that's been healers for many generations. And so I started learning when I was 7 in Trinidad, where I was born. And I never intended to be a full-time healer. I never intended to be a full-time herbalist. I'm also an artist, and I was, happily going to pursue a career in art. And then, life had other ideas. And when I was 25, just when I was sort of starting my sexual journey and just starting to become myself, I got herpes.
Yeah.
And it hit me like a ton of bricks. First of all, I'm from a religious family. I grew up, in a born again Christian family. So there was all kinds of religious implications to me, getting herpes. I thought, that I was being punished by God, for premarital sex, and
Yeah.
just felt like, ashamed and, all compromised and all that stuff. Plus, it was back in 1990, and there didn't seem to be a lot known about herpes back then. It seemed to be a bit of the dark ages as far
Yeah.
as herpes is concerned. So when I got it, my doctor just basically said, don't worry about it. You don't even have to use a condom. Just don't have sex when you're having sores, and just go forth and do your thing. This was after 2 years of him telling me that I didn't have herpes, that it was, an ingrown hair or whatever. And 2 years of me telling him, yeah, it's herpes.
Yeah.
So needless to say, I didn't get much help. And I tried the drug for herpes, and I had a bad reaction to it. It gave me headaches, made me feel foggy headed. So I knew that wasn't sustainable for me. So I had to figure out what to do. So I, took advantage of my family's background in herbal medicine and started, doing some experiments. And I didn't really get that far, frankly. But fortunately for me, it was also the height of the AIDS epidemic.
Yeah.
And I had lots of colleagues that were, treating HIV and AIDS. And I learned a lot from them. And what they discovered pretty early on is if you throw any one particular thing at HIV, gets around it pretty easily. Even if it works initially, the effectiveness will wane over a period of time. And what they found was more successful was throwing combination cocktails at at the virus and using a multi-layered holistic approach that included diet and exercise and supplements and emotional and psychological support. So I kind of copied their approach and, started creating combination remedies for herpes, and included things like yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong, dietary changes, and diet's crucial in treating herpes, and some simple supplements and herbs, and bam, that made a big difference. And
well, I want to get into all those nuggets, because you just threw out a lot of great stuff. And the first thing is just sharing your diagnosis at the age of 25, right? And I think one of the things that in our initial phone call that I think is so important to talk about is just how much it changes a person's ability to have sexual relationships and to be intimate with people, and the conversations that it changes and how you feel. I know that for me, my situation was a little bit different than yours, and that was something that happened to me later in life. And it was like immediately I was like, oh my God, I'm not telling anyone, like no one. Like I didn't even want to Google it, because I was like, oh, the AI is going to have all this information on me. And so, it really does change your life. And one of the things you also talk about in your book, which I haven't finished in its entirety, that I think we both share of how we describe this, is it's almost like this new age leprosy. It's like from the biblical days of, feeling like a leper. And really taking that stigma away is the most important thing, because it's more about the mind virus than it is actually the herpes virus. Of course, there's a lot of things we need to do to our physical body, but how we react to the virus is so important. And I think that for a lot of people out there that are suffering from this ongoing shame, and it's just really a guilt and all these different emotions that go along with it. If we can release those, oh my goodness, that's the battle right there, right? And I think we shared that sentiment about the mental aspect of the virus as well.
Oh, totally. I couldn't agree with you more. And sadly, for a lot of my patients, taking care of their physical issues is fairly easy and fairly straightforward. I can help people stop having outbreaks. What's more challenging is encouraging people to get back out there and date, helping people rebuild their self-esteem, helping people feel confident that they can have safer sex, because a lot of people are sort of morbidly afraid of infecting other people. I've had people come to me that haven't had sex for like more than a decade. And, my message is, that's not living, that's not life. And it's important, to live. And I always encourage people to sort of think and believe and understand that herpes doesn't change you. Herpes doesn't make you more attractive, but it certainly doesn't make you less attractive. It doesn't make you smarter. It doesn't make you less smart. It doesn't make you cooler. It doesn't make you less cool. You're the same person that you were, and you're probably better. I mean, for me, it forced me to be healthier. It forced me to be more careful with my body. So it actually turned out to be a blessing, and also, gave me, this vocation, that I feel good about. If you'd have told me, when I first got herpes that I was going to end up talking about it all the time and putting my picture on my book and all this stuff, I would have said, no way, you're crazy. That would never, ever happen. But it's,
and here we are. Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing that the sentiment that we shared is that it's really an early indicator light for your body, right? Whether it's a check engine light, early indicator light, it's a flag that goes, oh, maybe there's something else I need to do for my body if you think that you might be getting an outbreak. So I've looked at herpes as just a real blessing in many ways. And it sounds weird to say that, but it's something that I really feel at this point, because look, we all have viruses, a lot of viruses in our bodies that remain dormant, that don't necessarily have as much of an indicator for us that, hey, maybe we're too acidic, we need to be more alkaline. Maybe we have too much stress. Maybe we're not getting enough sleep. Maybe our diet needs to change, right? So it's a great indicator for what our body is trying to tell us, that it's out of balance of something. So, and I know you talk a lot about that with your patients as well.
Yeah, definitely. And not just our bodies. It's a great, as you say, early warning system to let us know if we're maybe not in the right relationship, maybe not in the right job,
Yeah.
maybe, maybe our kids are too codependent, or, definitely if something in your life is not at equilibrium, if something is, not really working for you, often herpes will give you a little nudge and say, hey, I think you need to work on this if you don't want to have outbreaks.
I was fascinated because you talk to a lot of people that have herpes. In launching the book, I have a lot of people that come up to me and say, "Do you have herpes?" or "I have herpes," or they want to have that more secret conversation. And what I find is that a lot of people that interview me on podcasts and shows, they kind of gloss over. Like they ask me, like, "What does the title mean?" But then they never ask many questions about herpes, right? Like they never really want to dive into it. So I find it fascinating that, on a big global scale, people don't want to talk about it, but on an individual scale, man, people want to talk about it. So to have someone like you that they can call that has all of this experience, with it in their life, but also experience as a holistic practitioner, that's a huge resource for people to have. So I think it's fabulous that you're doing the work that you're doing. And it is always so interesting how the universe swirls us around to our vocations and the things that we do to contribute to the awakening of humanity here on the planet. But share a little bit more about some of the things that you hear from patients, like some of the things that are kind of at the top of the list, like one of them not actually having intimacy. What are some of the other things that you hear from people consistently?
A lot of things. So with younger women, often the concern is about whether or not they're going to be able to have safe natural childbirth.
Okay.
And, my answer is, of course. um, there's sort of an elevated hype out there about how dangerous herpes might be, during childbirth. And certainly if you're having an outbreak during delivery, it's not safe.
Yeah.
But it's very easy to have a safe natural pregnancy. There's, almost never a need for a C-section if you have herpes. So that's one of the things that I work with and encourage younger women to, to understand.
Yeah.
And of course, having a C-section is a lot less healthy for your baby's immune system,
Yeah.
than having a natural childbirth. So that's one of the things. Also, there's just so much misinformation. So much of my time is just sort of correcting, the misinformation out there. Herpes isn't as easy to transmit to another person as people might think. I'm not saying,
It's not as easy.
it's not as easy. It's not as easy to give someone herpes as you might think. And I don't mean, I'm not trying to encourage people to be reckless and just,
Right.
go buck wild or whatever. But most of my patients are women, about 80 to 85%. And so, for example, in a heterosexual context, it is 3 times harder for a woman to give herpes to a man than it is for a man to give herpes to a woman.
Okay.
So with most of my patients being women, a lot of them are just very morbidly afraid of infecting, the next lover that they might have or their current lover.
Yeah.
And so I, help them understand how unlikely that is and how easy it is to take simple steps to enhance your safer sexuality so that the risk is reduced to a point where it's not even worth, thinking about. And
Right.
that's what you want. You don't want, during intimacy at the back of your mind to be worried about, herpes or thinking about herpes or hyper aware of the virus. You don't want the
Yeah.
virus as part of your lovemaking.
Right.
you want,
No,
you,
and
you,
that can be, especially if the other partner is worried, it can change the whole energetic dynamic. Let's take it one step before that, because I think one of the other things that is so challenging is to have that herpes talk, right? You're with a new partner, and everybody has varying, I guess, ideas as to when they're going to have that herpes talk. But what is it that you recommend for people, for them to be able to have a really safe environment to share something like this with a partner? Do you have sort of a protocol or any particular advice that you give to people?
Yeah, thank you for asking. That's very important. The first thing I can't stress enough is please do not have a herpes talk.
Okay.
Do not have a herpes talk.
Tell us
Please,
more.
please don't have a herpes talk. It shouldn't be a confessional. It shouldn't be a one-way, reveal where I've got this thing I need to tell you. I've got this heavy, thing that I need to tell you. No, in fact, it shouldn't be a herpes talk at all. What it should be is a sex talk, and it should be the same sex talk that we have in 2023, whether you have herpes or not. So it's not a herpes specific talk. Really, it's not particularly relevant to herpes. It's about sex, and it's about safer sexuality. So if you don't mind for a second, I'll role play with you, Beth.
Okay.
Okay. Let's say I'm like extremely lucky and you're interested in dating me.
Okay.
I'm interested in dating you.
Okay.
I would say, hey, Beth,
well, we've been on a few dates probably at
yeah,
this point. Yes. Okay.
well,
Or no.
It could be that we've been on one date. I mean,
Okay.
you want to have a talk. I would encourage people to have a talk as soon as you believe you're going to have sex with somebody.
Oh, okay.
When you're getting that special feeling that,
Okay.
you're interested in them, they're interested in you. You can
Okay.
feel the fires burning. It's
Okay.
just a matter of time.
Okay.
When you've reached
Okay.
that point of inevitability.
Okay.
And that could be on the first date, that could be
Okay.
on the 10th date. I mean, it's different, but I would encourage people not to delay it, because some people will say, well, I'm going to wait later and wait, till the other person's in love with me. And I'm saying
Yeah.
that's a little bit manipulative, because you're then
Yeah.
making it harder for them to have free choice because they're so invested in you, right? So
Yeah.
that might limit your risk of rejection, but I don't think that's necessarily fair play. So
And we're also not talking about like that we're in the heat of the moment right now, right? Like we know the chemistry's there, but we're out to dinner or something.
yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah.
Okay.
This is not a conversation you want to have in bed.
Right, which a lot of people wait for, right? Like,
Yeah.
Okay.
So no, I would, let's say you and I have had 2 dates and we're contemplating a third, and I already have the hots for you, and I think you have the hots for me. I would say, hey, Beth, I hope I'm not misreading the situation, but I'm interested in you sexually, and I'm thinking that you're interested in me sexually too. Am I off, or am I on the right track? And you would say,
Okay.
and what would you say, Beth?
And I would say, yes, I'm equally interested. It seems kind of weird to role play, but yes. So I'm saying, yes, I'm equally interested. And so that opens the door, right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
And I'll say, well, because I've broached the subject, I would love to have a conversation with you about sex and safer sex. And I'm going to tell you a bit about me, and I want to find out the same things about you.
Okay.
And I would say, I'm 57. I've had this number of lovers. I have been tested.
We need to disclose the number of lovers we've had, or that's just
yes, it's very important.
Oh,
That's probably the most important part of the conversation, and I'll explain why later if you want.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll say I've had this number of lovers. I've been tested for STIs. The only STI I've ever had so far has been HSV, which I've had for 32 years. And I like to.
And are you suggesting people say HSV as opposed to the word herpes? Like, is that a very?
No, they can say whatever they want. They can say whatever they want. Me being a little clinical, I'll say HSV. And they don't have to say how long they've had it or whatever. You don't have to explain anything. You just lay it all out. So I could just say I have HSV. And I like to practice safer sex. So I normally use a condom, and I normally use an antiviral gel as well. And if I'm having sex with someone that's of a childbearing age, condoms are my main way of practicing contraception. So that's me. So tell me about you. and you would tell me your age, you would tell me how many lovers you've had, whether or not you like to practice safer sex, what prophylactics do you use for safer sex, and whether or not you want to have my baby. And if you don't want to have my baby, how do you plan not to have my baby? So that's the conversation. And as you can see, it's an equal conversation with two people just sharing pertinent details that each other should have in assessing, what kind of safer sex you want to have. So for example, the number of lovers is very important for two reasons. One is only 30% of the people that have herpes know they have it. So most people don't know, because most people never have had a blood test for herpes, or they don't know what the signs are. And the information on the internet is pretty bad in that regard. So as a rule of thumb, every lover you've had, every sex partner you've had increases your risk of herpes by about 10%. So for example, if you were to say to me, I've had 35 lovers and I'm pretty sure that I don't have herpes, I would be skeptical of that. And it's not necessarily that because you're misleading me, but you may not know.
Yeah.
So if someone says to you, I've had 6 lovers and I've had no STIs, yeah, that's very possible.
Right.
If someone says they've had 20 or 30 lovers or 40 or 50 or 100 and they've had no STIs, that's not possible. 80% of the population has had chlamydia. Most women have had chlamydia more than once. 70% of the population has had HPV, and 60% of the population has had herpes 1 or herpes 2 or both. So even just those 3 out of 30 STIs, it's not possible for someone to have had, lots of lover. So one is to assess whether or not it's likely the other person has herpes, because of course, if the other person has herpes, then you don't have to have this morbid fear of giving the other person herpes, right? So if I was about to date someone that's had 30 lovers, I would be less concerned about potentially infecting them with herpes than if I was dating someone that only had 3 lovers. Let's say someone that was married for 25 years to their, to their college sweetheart or something. So that's one issue. The other issue is simply deciding on what level of safer sex you want to practice, because safer sex should be a mutual agreement that aligns with the two people's comfort zones and priorities. So if I were a woman, for example, and I was dating a man, who had more than 10 lovers, more than 20 minutes, whatever, I would be much more sort of invested in definitely using a condom, at least initially, than, someone that's had two lovers or something like that. But it's an individual, calculation based on, what works, for each person. Some people are willing to be more risky, for the sake of spontaneity or other, whatever. And some people want to practice as safer sex as possible. And some people take it to an extreme. I mean, there's some people that would not sort of put their hands on another person while wearing latex gloves, for example.
Well,
I think that's a little too far, but
I think so. I think what I'm taking away is I really like how you're positioning the safer sex discussion. So it's about pregnancy. It's about you really can put this into a nice category. I mean, it's also about soul sharing, right? It's like how you talk about your sensuality and what's your comfort zone, and so it is more of a sacred sensuality talk more than anything. Like, how do we, I feel this, how do we want to interact with each other? I think that's a really nice thing, because understanding how you want to do soul sharing, because even if you're just hot for each other, you're still going to be on each other's life cords. If you're having sexual intimacy, whether you want to or not, you still share an element of yourself and your aura and your energy. having that interaction. And so I think it's really important to have those more sacred conversations about what the expectation is and the expectation of having intimacy with someone. So I like that you're bringing that forward, and that it's not the herpes talk. So thank you for reframing that. I love kind of taking that off the table. But that's, I think, what a lot of people feel is that they have to have the herpes talk, because that's the one thing. Now, the one thing that no one wants to talk about except for us. Do you also recommend that people have their test results, and like, hey, I can show a clean bill of health? Like, that's been, I think, something that a lot of people talk about is actually having the tests that show that they're clean. Is that something you recommend, or you're kind of like, yeah, it doesn't matter?
I think it depends. I think the younger generations, because I am 57, the millennials and Gen Y, I think are much more on it as far as like, here are my test results. I think, for Gen Xers like me and, baby boomers or whatever, I don't think that that's as much a part of like our culture.
Okay.
So I encourage people to do whatever works for them. However, I think that you can't over rely on the tests.
Mhm.
So, for example, they're testing you for 8 out of 30 STIs. So they're not testing you for herpes, and they're not testing you for HPV on a standard panel.
Yeah. Why don't they? Is there a medical association guideline? I mean, why would that not be on a test?
Well, there is no test for HPV other than a Pap smear for women. So unless you have an abnormal Pap smear, or unless you see genital warts,
I mean, for herpes, like, why wouldn't that be on the docket? They're always testing for chlamydia, gonorrhea, but you have to ask for a herpes test.
you have to ask, and sometimes you have to fight, and sometimes you have to pay a lot extra. Like here in Vancouver, you have to pay like $140, and most doctors will not schedule you for a herpes test unless you have a fight with them.
Any opinion on why? I mean, why would we?
Oh no. The why is not a mystery. The government and doctors have made it very clear, and that is when they test people for herpes, 80% of people test positive. So they're like, why bother testing when everybody has herpes and there is no serious medical risk to having herpes? They consider herpes practically a non-disease. It's a snore for them, and that's why there are not charities raising money for herpes research. There's very few scientists that want to get into herpes research because there's no glamour, there's no glory, there's no big money. You're not going to win a Nobel Prize for herpes research. But what other disease that affects 60% of the population has no celebrity spokespersons? In fact, celebrities won't even admit they have herpes, and a lot of them must. The only one that ever has, unfortunately, is just recently died, and that was the actress Anne Heche. She's the only celebrity that I know of that has gone forward and talked about, her herpes. Nobody else does, unless they're in court being sued for giving someone herpes. Which a number of celebrities have been sued. For doctors, it's pretty much a non-issue. I mean, it's not going to kill you. It's not going to debilitate you in any particular way. So they're just not that invested.
But it is a gateway virus. So I find it odd that it's not something. I get it that it's not necessarily going to cause cancer, like HPV would, but it's still a gateway virus that has to do with our immune system. So I'm not asking for you to say that it's the medical community. I just find it bizarre and odd that we wouldn't be testing for it, and that we wouldn't, and we don't need to normalize herpes. I'm not necessarily saying that, but it is normalized. Like, there are so many people that have it that it just feels so bizarre that it has to remain, or doesn't have to, but that it does remain this secret, right? That it's a secret that people don't want to talk about, that causes so much emotional trauma. And if we just all talked about it, like, it just releases so much of that trigger and that negativity and that, all of the connotations around it. It's just so incredible that we as a society hold this mental thought construct around, this virus that impacts the genitals as being so terrible. I've had multiple conversations, and one that I had with a sexologist, and we talked a lot about how it can be viewed as such a beautiful time, like when there is an outbreak, right? That how you can just shift and switch how you look at it. Because if someone was sick with the flu virus, and they were down and out for 10 days, or 5 days or 2 days or whatever, you would pamper them, you would bring them soup, yeah. So why does it have to be different when it comes to something like a herpes virus, right? Like, why can't we change the way that we do things? I mean, I'm saying we, but I mean like the general public, because most people don't, right? Most people don't have that shift in the mindset around it.
Yeah, and all of us have a little bit of personal responsibility about that, but it's more of a societal, issue.
Yeah.
We live in a very immature society when it comes to sex and sexuality.
Yeah.
And there's so much sort of discomfort and shame and slut shaming and all that kind of stuff regarding anything that's connected, to sex. So if you have, an infection that's, sexually, driven,
Right.
it just opens the door for sex negative people to, to want to stigmatize that the way that
Yeah.
they did in the 80s and 90s with HIV. And it was only because the gay community fought back, and they had movements like ACT UP that forced the mainstream to have a more progressive relationship with HIV. And it took the courage of celebrities like Rock Hudson and Magic Johnson and
Wow.
whatever to put a face and humanize the virus. But no one's doing that for herpes. I mean, where is the Rock Hudsons of herpes? Where's the Magic Johnson of?
Hey, we're headed to New York Times bestseller list. I'm happy to be the spokesperson about herpes. I'm happy to break all the stigma around this ridiculous virus that you can prevent. But one of the things I wanted to get into with you, because I know that you've done so much research and you've helped so many people, is, I think there's always the hope that people have of, wait, can I cure herpes? And there's all these things online that say they cure herpes, take this and it'll help with herpes. And so I would love for you to help dispel some of the myths around this, because from my understanding, there is no cure for herpes at this point, like to genuinely have it be completely out of your body. So maybe there is, and we don't know about it, but tell us about some of the myths that are out there. Because also, like the whole lysine story, I'm curious to have you comment on that. And then after we do that, I want to get into some of the remedies that you do believe in. So let's talk about the myths and the misinformation, because I post a lot of stuff about herpes on my YouTube channel, and I get so many people that write on there. It's just advertising, right? Dr. So-and-so cured my herpes. I haven't reached out to any of them, but yeah. So tell us about the misinformation around the cures and the hope for it.
Well, I mean, there's been a long tradition of snake oil out there, and it continues. If anyone had a cure for herpes, they'd be richer than Elon Musk. I mean,
Right.
it's just it's a fantasy. There is no cure for herpes. It's unlikely to be a cure for herpes in our lifetime. We don't even have an effective vaccine for herpes, despite 30 plus years of trying to develop an effective vaccine for it. And we just have to be humble. So humility is in order, because there's almost no viruses that we can currently cure. We can't even cure the common cold. We can't cure the flu. We certainly can't cure COVID. We can't even prevent it.
One little caveat I wanted to jump in on is I did look up, just before I got on this call, research related to herpes, and I didn't have a whole lot of time, but what I was really surprised by was that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation gave $30 million in grant money to look at herpes, but as a gateway to HIV, and how, a pharmaceutical product, because I also want you to comment on the pharmaceutical products, could help reduce contracting AIDS, HIV, because of this medication for herpes. So I thought, wow, $30 million for that, but not on why wouldn't we spend $30 million on all the great remedies that we have out there that are natural and of course unpatentable, right? Yeah, it just really threw me to see $30 million go towards that. So there is some research, but it's just in the wrong place.
Yeah, and that was a good effort by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You're talking about CareGuard, which is something they brought up to second stage trials with the FDA. And what it was, they wanted to find a microbiocide, a substance that women could put inside of their vaginas to help them not get HIV, because they recognized that in a lot of third world countries, especially, men are not going to wear condoms. They're just going to refuse to.
Right.
So they wanted to make something that could be helpful in that situation. And they did spend $30 million, and they had great initial results with a seaweed-based microbiocide. However, I hope I don't get sued by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but they were a bit arrogant in the design of the trial, because what they did is they just basically just gave it to the women and told them to go home and use it. So initially in the clinic, when women would use it in the clinic, it had great results. But when they went home, their husbands were like, "You're not using that shit." And they weren't able to really use it as directed. So the second stage trials failed, but it was good research, and it was helpful to me because I was already making my own microbiocide, and their research helped me and helped other people. So it wasn't totally a waste. It was a great effort. But and they've done great things with malaria and lots of other illnesses as well. So they've done great work in that realm.
I want to get to that microbiocide too, but I still let's can you talk about some of the myths we need to debunk, especially lysine, because that's something I think a lot of people are told, and you have an opinion on that, right?
Sure. Lysine is okay, short term. I would say 6 months or less. It's not as effective as it's hyped to be, but it can be a bit helpful. But again, you can't throw one substance at the herpes virus; it'll just laugh at it. It just doesn't work that way. So, could you include a lysine in as part of your protocol? Sure. Do I think you need to? No.
Okay. Good to know. Okay.
But I'm open to people, doing their own thing. But it is true that it's important to have a diet that's rich in lysine and low in arginine to help your body balance its own relationship with herpes. So the more lysine you have in your body through your diet, the less able the virus is to make copies of itself, and vice versa. The more arginine that you have compared to lysine in your body, the easier it is for the virus to make copies of itself. So rather than taking pills, it would be better to have salmon 3 times a week if you're not a vegan or a vegetarian. But make sure the salmon has skin on it, and make sure it's wild, not farm salmon. It's better to have sardines every day. It's better to have tuna once a week, but no more than once a week because of the mercury. It's better to have hemp seeds, 4 tablespoons of hemp seeds a day. It's better to have flax seeds and chia seeds. So it's better to get your lysine from your diet, from potatoes, from eggs, etc.
The pill form is not as active, obviously, right? Is that what you would say, or how would you accurately depict the pill form of lysine?
What I would say is, rather than forcing an outcome on your body by artificially, introducing lysine through a pill, which is not buffered the way it would be in food, and isn't working with your body's internal mechanisms, it's forcing an outcome. That or after a period of time disrupts too much the natural balance in your body between lysine and arginine. So in a short term, if you're having a bad outbreak, or if you're new to herpes, because you don't get antibodies in the first 5 months or so. So if you're newly infected and your herpes is out of control, it could be helpful. But it's not, you're gonna have herpes for the rest of your life. So you want sustainable solutions and not something, that might be okay short term, but is not a good idea long term. So in general, I encourage people to use their diet as much as possible as the vehicle, rather than, popping a lot of pills. As far as supplements go, really the only supplements specific to herpes that you need are zinc, selenium, vitamin D is in dog 3. So,
Okay.
Those are the only ones you particularly need.
Okay. And will those also help with other viruses?
Sure. I mean, those are for your immune system. So, in holistic healing, we're not super focused on a disease per se. We're looking at the person, and we're looking at trying to keep the person's body in balance so your body does what it's supposed to do. And your body is so well designed, your immune system is so amazing that just keeping it in balance, giving a little bit of support, not damaging it by doing weird things, is mostly all you need to do to keep the virus dormant. For some people, they'll have to work a little bit harder if you're having hormone issues, or if you have other, infectious diseases. Like COVID has been a disaster for herpes. A lot of my patients that hadn't had outbreaks for years and got COVID, started getting outbreaks again, and we had to start working again on getting that under control. And definitely long COVID has not been helpful for herpes. But barring that, just giving your body some support and encouragement is really all you normally need to do.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't know that there was a correlation to COVID. So that's fascinating. Okay, so were there any other myths? Because there wasn't anything else that you were like, yeah, this is out there in the mainstream, but it's just, I mean, other than the fact that most people that say that they have a cure is definitely a scam, but they might have something, they might have the herbs that help reduce, but nothing's out there curing it. So we know that lysine, you're saying, is okay, but not necessarily all that it's cracked up to be as far as how much airtime it gets with prevention. And you're saying that earlier is better than maybe later with lysine, but most importantly, get it from natural products.
Yes. Yeah, and also don't be so focused on medicine that comes in a bottle, because that's only a small part of the equation. And quite frankly, if you had herpes and you were having regular outbreaks, one of the best things you can do is 20 minutes of yoga every day at home.
Oh,
If you did a 20-minute hatha routine at home every day, you would probably experience 50% fewer outbreaks than not doing the yoga.
Well, you probably experience a lot of positive benefits, but why specifically are you saying this for reducing herpes outbreaks?
Well, the virus lives, in your nervous system. It lives, in the neurons, and so it's privy to, the processes that your nervous system goes through. Right. So anything that relaxes your nerves, meditation, yoga, tai chi, qigong, lots of other things that relax you. But in my experience, yoga has been, the thing. Will help keep the virus dormant. And anything that overstimulates your nervous system, like caffeine and other kinds of central nervous system stimulants, stress, anxiety, that kind of thing, will exacerbate the situation and can literally, sort of wake up the virus. So that's what, why yoga is helpful. And it's just, and also just the releasing of, those nice hormones and the emotional and spiritual impact, that it has on you. There's been so much research on how good yoga is for you. But I mean, it's free to do yoga in your own home. No one can stop you. You don't have to be dependent on decent weather or your car starting or whatever. So you can't possibly lose by doing the yoga. So that's, one of the main things. So if you do that, if you make sure you're getting good quality sleep, like at least 7 hours of good solid sleep every night, if you're eating the appropriate diet, the lysine rich, low carb, no caffeine, no nuts diet.
Oh, no nuts. Why no nuts?
Nuts can trigger outbreaks. Nuts are very high in arginine compared to lysine.
Oh,
So,
interesting. Okay.
so not everyone is sensitive to nuts.
Yeah.
I am. I once went over 4 years without an outbreak, and I thought, oh, I'm doing good. And I was in California, and I drove by a roadside nut stand, and I couldn't help myself, and
You went nuts for nuts. Yeah.
I went nuts. I bought pistachios, which are my favorite nut. And I golfed, in 2 days, I ate a pound of pistachios. And I went from not having an outbreak in 4.5 years to having an outbreak every single month for 4 months in a row,
Oh no.
just
Oh,
from that, just from that bag of pistachios.
right.
You know,
Wow.
not everyone's as sensitive to nuts as I am, but definitely for most people, nuts are not a good idea.
Okay. Good to
If you have,
know.
yeah.
Yeah, good to know. So some of the other herbs that you talked about, do you, I don't know if I should use the word prescribe, but do you supply them? Do you recommend that people go buy them, grow them? Like what's your best recommendation on the ones? And we can put it in the notes below to the actual names of what you listed off earlier, because I myself can't even rattle them off at this moment. But share with us the best way for people to access these mother nature's magic.
Well, what I do in my clinic is I have consultations with people, and I learn about their medical history and their lifestyle and their current symptoms, and I custom blend something for them myself. I make all my remedies by hand the old-fashioned way, and I send it to them in the mail. That's how I work. So my remedies are tailored to each person. So like a 55-year-old woman that's perimenopausal is going to need something very different than a 25-year-old guy or a 30-year-old woman. I custom make for people. But over the years, I've also encouraged lots of people to make their own remedies. They're fun to make. Helps connect you more, with the medicine that you're taking into your own body. And so, not everyone's inclined to be a do-it-yourselfer, but if you are, then I'm always happy to help people learn how to do it and advise them on what herbs they should include in their particular formula. And there's other people that just, are very autonomous and just want to do their own thing and, don't want to make it, don't necessarily want to get it from me. And for those people, there's some simple herbs that are quite helpful. So for example, if you're lucky enough to have a backyard or a front yard or anywhere where you can grow plants, please grow lemon balm. And, for as long during the year as weather permits, in the morning, before the sun gets too hot, cut off some top leaves of the lemon balm and have some lemon balm tea. That is one of the best things that you can do, for your herpes. If you can't grow lemon balm, then try and get a lemon balm essential oil and sniff that, and you can also rub that on your skin, combined, with other essential oils or by itself.
Sniffing it it has the same impact as drinking it like in a tea?
Well, yes, in many ways. It's also good for short-term memory loss, by the way. but
Okay.
but
Good to know.
yeah, it's the volatile oils that are the most important part of the lemon balm. That's why dried lemon balm doesn't really work for herpes. So that's why the fresh plant is the best. But both inhaling it and also applying it topically. So
And does it grow kind of everywhere, or is it a difficult thing to grow? Can you grow it inside,
No,
like if you live somewhere where it's cold, like Canada?
um, it takes up a fair amount of room, so you wouldn't want to
Okay,
grow it out inside. But even if you had a balcony in Canada, you know, 7 months of the year, it would still grow.
okay.
It grows best in sort of open shade, partial shade or full shade. It doesn't do well in full sun. It's too hard for it. Um, and it's a member of the mint family. It's amazing. Um, besides herpes, it's a great nerve vine. It helps calm your nerves.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and it smells good and it tastes good. I mean, I can't say enough about it.
Yeah.
Um, another member of the mint family, the Labiaceae family, is Prunella vulgaris, also called self-heal. And
Okay.
it's a beautiful little flower that will spring up on a lot of people's lawns in the spring. But I would suggest, and that one can be used dried, so people could grow that, or they could just buy that dried if they wanted to include that in their formula. Um, reishi mushroom is a good bet for your formula. Skull cap is a good bet for your formula. Lavender is a good bet for your formula. So those are some things, but definitely lemon balm and self heal would be two of the ones that I would recommend the most if people wanted to make their own. And
Yeah, but I do like your point that, calling you and having a consultation is really an important thing, because then you can get something that's tailored, I think, for your overall health and for your, like you said, your age, your hormones, everything else that's going on. So it sounds like it can do a whole lot more than just help herpes.
sure,
Having a
yes.
consultation with you, but walk us through a little bit what that looks like. So somebody books a consultation with you and you go through what, a medical history with them, an emotional history with them. Like, what does that look like? And how do you, just give us a brief on like what people would expect coming to a session with you.
Well, first of all, they should expect to laugh or cry or both.
Okay.
I've had consultations where the people have been so upset because they've had no one to talk
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Sometimes they can't even talk to their spouse.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I'll give you one example. I had a consultation with a 17-year-old woman, I guess a girl at 17, who lived in a small town of 700 people,
Oh,
and
wow. Wow. That's a big deal.
she got herpes the very first time she had sex.
Mm.
And she was borderline suicidal, because she was like, I can't tell anyone, obviously, that I know. And, who am I going to date now? And, my life is over.
Yeah.
And I, had to work really hard to sort of help her dig herself out of, and at 17, you're so emotional anyways. Um, so there was a lot of crying in that
Yeah.
consultation,
Yeah.
but, you know, but she did well. I give her a lot of credit. She ended up, doing, quite well and going off to university, and, is good. Um, but I also try and help people laugh, because I don't like the doom and gloom. And that's the one thing that bothers me about the internet. People tell me, well, yeah, I went on the internet and all there is these
Yeah.
terrible photos.
Yeah.
And these photos do not represent how 90 to 95% of people experience herpes at all. But for some reason, they want to put the most horrific photos on the internet.
Yeah.
And then in support groups on the internet, there's often a lot of doom talking, a lot of doom and gloom, and my life is over, and blah blah blah. I'm so angry and whatever. And I'm like, no, I mean,
Yeah.
this is a little minor disease, and you don't have to accept the stigma.
Well, and thinking about the anger part, do you have something that you guide people on to help them work through that anger? Because I mean, having a conversation with you, I'm sure, is amazing in the sense that they can feel heard and they can ask questions. But is there something in particular that you have them do to try to release the trauma that's around contracting the virus. Because, you know, a lot of times I mean, I have my story, everybody has a story about how it happened, and varying degrees of trauma, right? It could be that someone intentionally did it. It could be that someone had an affair. So there's like all these other things that, you know, all get infiltrated around getting that virus. Is there, yeah, like a particular thing that you recommend?
Yeah, and great question again. Thank you. Yeah, there's often a lot of anger because lots of times people got herpes when they were deceived and the other person never even warned them that they had herpes. So they're angry at the person that gave them herpes. They're angry at themselves for thinking that they let themselves down by not being careful enough. Um, and you know, my message to them is that's not really helpful thinking, because it's never a question of if you're going to get an STI. It's only a question of which ones you're going to get. I mean, no one is going to walk through this life and not have an STI unless, yeah, I don't know, unless you, again, you married your childhood sweetheart and you only had one partner, and even then you're gonna have to be lucky, because lots of people got herpes by being kissed by their aunt or grandma or something. So you know, but yeah, there's often a lot of anger. So yeah, I try and, you know, talk to them, but I also have self-hypnosis tracks that I have people listen to, and they find that quite helpful. So with the book, there's also self-hypnosis tracks that go along with the book that kind of reinforce some of the messages, and it helps people tap into, you know, their emotions surrounding herpes, and looking at those things and starting to release those things.
Yeah.
Um,
'Cause I think a lot of people have a lot of suppressed emotion around that. Yeah, so I love that you're recommending the hypnosis. It's such a great tool for so many things, but I had not thought of it really for herpes as a potential way to help release some of the suppressed emotions, whether it's, you know, anger, shame, guilt, or whatever. Because it's also can be that someone's given herpes to someone else, and that's also, you know, a whole nother plethora of emotions that someone can be experiencing. Yeah, having the virus and sharing the virus, and yeah.
yeah, and you know, it can get pretty deep. So you know, getting herpes can often be a hard hit to people's self-esteem,
Yeah.
especially if they were struggling with their self-esteem before getting herpes. So you know, there's a lot to unpack with those kinds of situations, and I encourage people to get therapy. I encourage people to use different tools. And I was also helped recently, like last year and this year. One of my former patients, who's now become a colleague of mine, she specializes in sort of, you know, trauma informed support for people, and she helped me understand better that for a lot of people, the reason they're having outbreaks is they have unresolved trauma, and as you say, often unacknowledged trauma, and it can go back, you know, a long way. And so back to our theme of, you know, herpes being an opportunity and a gift,
Yeah.
it allows people and it incentivizes people to address that unresolved trauma that maybe they wouldn't have had as much incentive to address if they weren't getting these outbreaks to, you know,
Yeah.
sort of give them, you know, like a kick in the butt kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
well, I think that's also where the mind virus idea comes into this as well. I mean, we know the law of attraction, and when we fear something, we bring it closer to us oftentimes, right? And when we have no emotional attachment to something, we can release, yeah, the stress that probably comes to our body, the stress that comes to our immune system with trying to hold back an idea about something. And so, yeah, letting all of that go is so important to just release, and having a partner that can also be in that space with you, right? Having a partner that is in a position that they're okay with contracting the virus, if that were to be what the case is in the end of this, because sometimes it's unavoidable. Even though I know you have some other things that I'd like for you to talk about real quick that I think help, the gels. You mentioned it, but maybe share a little bit about what that is, because people can get that from you. I think it's a special formulation that you have, isn't it, that helps reduce the spread?
Yeah, I make a red marine algae based sex gel
Yeah.
that people can use in two different ways. They can apply it topically every day to help reduce the possibility of getting outbreaks, but they can also use it as a barrier gel for during intimacy.
Is it more
So
of a, does it have like a lubricant kind of thing, or is that something you would use? Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's viscous, so it functions as a lube as well.
Okay.
And it's water based, so it won't interfere with condoms.
Okay.
And it's completely natural, completely edible, completely non-toxic. So one of the reasons I developed it was for oral sex, because most of the people that are getting herpes on their genitals these days are not getting it from genital to genital contact. They're getting it from oral sex.
Interesting. Yeah.
And people that use condoms for genital contact most times will not use condoms for oral sex. So I
Yeah.
wanted to make something to help people with oral sex, because oral sex is as common as a handshake now
Wow.
these days. So yeah,
And
so
what does it taste like?
it doesn't have any particular taste.
Oh, okay. Okay.
it,
Okay.
it
Interesting.
doesn't taste bad, it doesn't taste good, it doesn't smell bad, it doesn't taste
Okay.
good.
Okay.
It's kind of got sort of like a blah. It's just,
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
not candy, it's not flavored, it's still
Yeah.
completely natural, but it's completely edible, completely non-toxic, no
And was this
preservatives
was
added.
this developed as a result of, is this where you were talking about the 30 million and the Gates Foundation, that you learned something from them that helped you with this particular formulation? Is that what I heard you say, or no, something different?
Yeah, I've been making the gel since 2003, so I was making it before I'd
Okay.
heard anything about Caragard, but definitely reading about Caragard and following some of the research attached to it helped me improve
Okay.
what I was doing. And it was helpful too because of climate change, because some of the seaweeds that I was working with initially, believe it or not, you can't even find anymore, because in the last 18 years, the water has warmed so much in the Pacific
Interesting.
that seaweeds we were finding in California and Oregon and British Columbia, we now have to go all the way up to Alaska to get, or
Oh,
they're
wow.
not there anymore,
Yeah.
or not there in sufficient quantities that you could harvest it ethically. So so that helped too. Helped me learn about other potential seaweeds that I could use than the ones that I was originally using. So it was
So
helpful.
people need to order their stash from you now, because when this video goes viral, everybody's going to be contacting you. There's only so much seaweed out there.
Exactly. Yes. And I only have so much time. Oh my God, I won't be able to sleep. There'll be so many orders.
Well, you've given just a wealth of information. I love all the insights and all the time that you've spent, professionally and personally researching and, yeah, providing insights to people to help them stop the suffering mentally and physically and emotionally. So thank you for all of your work. We'll be sure to put all of the links in the description below. But is there any final comments or topics that we should touch on that we haven't?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
I mean, we could do this for days. There's so much to talk about, and maybe we should do it again another
Yeah.
time, and we
Yeah.
can delve deeper into certain things. But just as an overview, we get a very bad sex education in this society, and we get a terrible education about herpes. So most people don't even understand what herpes is.
Yeah.
So most people don't know that every single animal that has a backbone gets herpes. Your dogs get herpes, cats get herpes, elephants get herpes, lions get herpes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
In fact, we're having a problem these days where, because of circuses and zoos, um,
But can
af-
humans get herpes from the animals?
no, but what I was about to say is, for
Okay.
example, because of zoos and circuses, African elephants are dying from Indian elephant herpes, and Indian elephants are dying from African elephant herpes, because those two populations have not met before, and we put them together and they're giving each other herpes, and it's not good.
Who
Um,
knew?
but
Yeah.
almost every animal that doesn't have a backbone gets herpes. So worms get herpes, Snails get herpes. Even coral reefs, about 60% of the coral in the sea have herpes. So when people are angry and come to me angry, I wish I didn't get herpes and whatever. I said, do you think the coral reefs are like angry and like yelling at each other, saying, "Oh my God, I wish I didn't have herpes"? Or do you think that dogs are freaked out? No, I mean, herpes is part of the natural ecosystem. None of us have a body that doesn't have herpes in it. There's 8 different human herpes viruses, and all of us have at least 1 or 2, but most of us have 3 or 4. So, for example, all of us that had chickenpox as a kid, chickenpox is a herpes virus. It's herpes bacilla. So, 90% of us that have that herpes virus in us. The virus that causes mononucleosis and glandular fever is a herpes virus, the Epstein-Barr virus, and 90% of us have that virus. Okay. So okay. Even if we don't talk about herpes 1 and herpes 2, we all have herpes viruses in us. We all have viruses in us. I always ask people, what percentage of the cells in our body do they think are human, and what percentage are viruses and bacteria and other microorganisms? So I'm gonna test you, Beth. What percentage of the cells in your body are human?
Well, I know a little bit more about gut health, and I don't know the percentages, but we have so many bacteria and viruses in our gut that I don't know. I mean, we could be, what are we, 60% water? I don't know what the equation would be. It's got to be pretty high, though.
So what percentage of our cells are human? Take a stab at it.
I don't know. Can I say 50-50? I don't know. I'm not sure.
Beth, you're only 10% human. Only 10% of your cells are human. 90% are viruses, wow, bacteria, prions, spirochetes, et cetera, et cetera. Wow. 90%. And we couldn't function without them. We couldn't function without the 13,000 different kinds of bacteria in our mouths that, on our teeth and in our mouths. We wouldn't have an immune system without, the viruses and bacteria in our intestines. Yeah. We're so interlinked because they are the dominant life form on this planet and have been, since day one. Not us. We're a sideshow. We think that we're all powerful, but what are we truly afraid of? We're afraid of viruses and bacteria because we know they can take us out. We're afraid of Ebola. We're afraid of avian flu, and we're afraid of COVID, and rightly so. I mean, they could kick our asses if they wanted to. And luckily, herpes doesn't. Herpes is not a virus that wants to destroy you. It just wants to live in you like a motel. And it can either be a good guest or it could be an unruly guest. And part of that is us negotiating our relationship with this guest that we didn't invite, that we don't want, and we can't get rid of. So we have to sort of make the best of it. But it's not Ebola, right? And it's not the avian flu. So we have to put that, into perspective.
Yes. All right. Well, so I think we've covered off on a lot, and yes, there is so much more we could talk about, but I think for this episode, let's close it out, and we can put more information in the description below, and people can find us in both of those places on your website and mine. Which website, if you want to just say it here on the video, which website is the best one for people to find you at to have consultation regarding herpes?
My Naturopractica site, so naturopractica.com, NATROPRACTICA.com.
Okay,
is the best one.
Great. Okay, well, with that, I think we'll close it out unless there's any last final comment you have.
I think you're a great interviewer, Beth.
Thank you. I thought you were going to say I'm a great spokesperson for herpes.
Oh, I have no doubt about that. And finally, we're getting a spokesperson. So thank you.
Yeah, well, you'll have to read the stories in the book, and I'm sure you'll have some good advice from me too. But all right, well, thank you so much for your time today, and yeah, you never know, we might have another discussion coming up, and I have a feeling we might have some people that have some questions, so we might be starting a whole movement here. We just don't know, do we?
No, but I look forward to it. However,
Okay.
however it manifests itself.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you so much for your time today, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you. Thank you.